The iPad Air 4 is a very interesting device within Apple's tablet lineup. The Air 4 is somewhat of an awkward middle child between the Pro and the standard iPad. For $600, you're getting that beloved iPad Pro design along with all of its functionality in combination with Apple's most powerful processor yet. But is it worth it? The iPad Air unboxing experience is pretty much the same as any other iPad to come out from this year. So inside the box, we've got the iPad Air itself, some documentation, and a 3-foot USB-C cable alongside an Apple 20-watt power adapter, and you'll of course also get a few Apple stickers. Just to clarify, no, you're not looking at an iPad Pro here. This is an iPad Air. They've done what we all suspected they'd do eventually, which is incorporate the iPad Pro body style into one of the lower end iPads. So the antennas, the bezels, and that power button are pretty much the only distinguishing factors between the Air and the 2018 iPad Pro as far as design goes. And overall, I like it. It's only 11 grams lighter than the new 11-inch iPad Pro and 8 grams lighter than the 2018 11-inch iPad Pro. So you kind of lose that wow factor you used to get with previous iPad Air models. They feel identical in weight, and that isn't a problem at all. I don't ever feel as though this tablet is too heavy in really any usability situation. With the current state of technology, Apple can only make their devices so light, and so as long as it's a light device in general, I'd say that's enough to keep the Air moniker. With the updated iPad Pro body style, we've got the new Smart Connector, which means the iPad Air 4 is going to be compatible with the Apple Magic Keyboard and the Apple Smart Keyboard Folio that they designed for the iPad Pros. And we've also got support for the second generation Apple Pencil. I think it's only right that they brought that support over for the second generation Pencil with the updated design. And as always, using the Apple Pencil is a really nice experience here on the iPad Air. I can't say the experience here is any worse than it is on the iPad Pro models. It's indistinguishable. And this year, Apple introduced 2 new blue and green colors for the Air this time around. Here, I've got the sky blue, and Apple sure as heck made it look real nice online and in pictures, but in person, even in really good lighting, this color is like if they took the saturation filter and brought it from 100 all the way down to 5%. It's a very pale blue, and while you can always see a hint of it on the aluminum rails here, it's barely a blue. It's honestly more of a silver with a light blue tint. That's how I'd best describe the color. Overall though, this tablet has a perfectly fine design, and I think the blue is, while subtle, a nice addition. The display, although featuring a slimmed down bezel, is probably one of the more mundane elements of the Air 4. It's 10.9 inches because of those slightly thicker bezels compared to the iPad Pro. It's got a 1640 by 2630 Liquid Retina IPS display, which means it's essentially got the same pixel density as the iPad 8 and the latest iPad Pro. It features True Tone technology and supports the P3 wide color gamut, so as far as colors and general display quality, you're going to have a viewing experience that's extremely similar to the iPad Pro. But the big thing that this tablet lacks in comparison to the Pro is the high refresh rate display. This is something that was never expected to come on this tablet, nor something that I think needs to be on the iPad Air, but that enhanced smoothness and general fluidity that you get from having ProMotion is something that having a crazy fast CPU or high resolution display will never be able to replicate. And if the Air 4 did have ProMotion, this would hands down be the best value iPad you could buy, period. But you gotta save some stuff for the Pro, right? TouchID has gotten its most unique evolution yet here in the iPad Air 4, as Apple's incorporated TouchID into the power button, which is their way of working around the lack of Face ID in the iPad Air. As you can see, it's substantially larger than the typical iPad power button. It's got a sleek metal strip going around the button with a shiny glass surface. And as with every version of TouchID, I never have issues. It reads my finger fast and accurately. My only issue with this application of TouchID, however, is the physical placement. I think it would have made much more sense for Apple to place it on the right vertical side of the display. This way it's easily accessible when using the tablet vertically and horizontally. After a while of using this tablet, it's definitely something that you'll get used to doing, but the placement of the button doesn't allow for a truly thoughtless unlocking experience like you get on a traditional Touch ID or Face ID device. And although Face ID is more of a premium feature, I don't think it would have hurt Apple to include it over Touch ID. It would definitely take some headache away from the case manufacturers, who are now going to have to work around the Touch ID button for all their cases. Sorry guys. The iPad Air, just like the new iPhone 12s, features the A14 Bionic processor along with 4GB of RAM. This is by far the most fast and capable the iPad Air has ever been. And although you're not going to get that same feel of fluidity that you get from the iPad Pro with the ProMotion display, the iPad Air objectively feels just as snappy as the iPad Pro does for everyday tasks. Opening and closing applications, playing games, using productivity apps, all feels really quick here on the iPad Air. When taking a look at Geekbench 5, the iPad Air blows the previous generation Air away for single-core and multi-core performance. The A14 is Apple's first 5nm CPU to be put in any iPad, which means the Air 4 is going to be 40% faster than the previous generation, have 30% faster graphics, and still offer improved power efficiency than the previous generation. When taking a look at video editing performance and LumaFusion, I've been extremely impressed with how this Air performs. I can easily import and work with footage from my 4K Canon camera. This is pretty dense H.265 footage that my iMac currently struggles to play in full quality. The iPad Air handles this footage with no sweat, and I can export a 5-minute high-quality video project in minutes. That's extremely impressive for a $600 tablet. And with a few accessories, this could easily be a laptop replacement for a lot of people. On paper, the Air 4 isn't as fast as the iPad Pro, but I'm confident that if you were to switch to this device from a 2018 or 2020 iPad Pro, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference in general performance. That A14 is putting in work. Gaming on the iPad Air is an enjoyable experience as well. I really do miss that 120Hz from the iPad Pro for gaming purposes, but not every iPad game actually has high frame rate support, so for a lot of people this doesn't make much of a difference. I played the Apple Arcade Samurai Jack game in addition to a few other titles with 60 frames per second support, and gaming on the Air 4 is very smooth. And while the iPad isn't a device I would recommend anyone buy strictly for mobile gaming, this will be a perfectly fine tablet to hand off to your child or younger relative who just wants to play some games. The Air will work just fine for that. Getting USB-C on the iPad Air is quite a big deal for this tablet because unlike previous Air models, you've now got the ability to connect USB-C docks and other accessories that will only expand the potential functionality of the tablet. For example, here I've got an engineering sample from an upcoming product from Fledging. They make incredibly fast storage devices that I personally use on the daily. This is the Fledging Hubble, and it's a 7-in-1 USB-C dock that you can incorporate into a folio case. So with this USB-C hub, I can easily connect my SD card and offload pictures or videos I took with my cameras, or get a 3.5mm headphone input because these are becoming increasingly more rare, so it's nice to see that here. The Lightning connection still only supports USB 2.0 transfer speeds as well, so transferring data to and from the iPad is going to be significantly faster than before. You've now got USB 3.0 5GB per second speeds, and this enables you to connect high-speed storage devices to the iPad, like USB flash drives, or even a display. I can use this with my LG Ultrafine display with no issues. USB-C opens a lot of doors for what you can now do on the iPad Air, and including it was a no-brainer. And make sure to subscribe because we've got a dedicated video on the Hubble coming soon. Apple claims you should get up to 10 hours of use out of the iPad Air, and while this tablet isn't necessarily the battery king in my experience, you should be able to get close to that with relatively light usage. If you're a power user though, and you consistently use more power-hungry applications, you're gonna see a dip in longevity. With moderate usage, watching YouTube videos, using iMessage, email, stuff like that, I get around 7 to 8 hours of screen on time, which is solid, but I can pretty much always get the tablet down to at least 30% by the end of the day. And while standby time is pretty good, just like any other iPad, it's noticeably worse than on the regular 8th generation iPad as far as the battery life. The Air doesn't give me the same all-day confidence that I get from the standard 8th generation iPad, but it's not bad. I just thought it'd be a bit better. The iPad Air 4 has the quad speaker grill setup just like on the iPad Pros, and the speakers on the iPad Air 4 are a nice improvement over the previous Air 3, but even though we've got larger grills here than we do on the iPad Pro, the iPad Air doesn't sound as good, but I think it's good enough for the average content consumer. Even though you've got 4 grills here, only 2 of them actually emit sound, and that alone makes a huge difference as far as sound quality between the iPad Pro and the Air. I think the iPad Air 4 does a good job of delivering an overall punchy and present sound with pretty crisp mids and highs, but I think the iPad Pro, just having those 2 extra speakers, it just delivers a much more full sound. On its own, I think the Air has a solid set of speakers, but when you put it next to the higher end iPad Pro, you can definitely hear the differences in what makes the Pro better. For all you iPad cinematographers out there, you're going to be quite pleased with the new camera features brought over to the Air 4. The iPad Air 3 featured a single lens camera with HDR photo capability and 1080p video. This year, we still have just the one lens, but it got a bump up to 12 megapixels to support 4K video capability up to 60 frames per second, as well as 1080p video up to 240 frames per second. And now the selfie camera can do 1080p video at up to 60 frames per second as well. Apple obviously doesn't market the iPad Air as a tablet for taking photos or video, and that's because the cameras are just aight. They're definitely improved from the last generation, but this is nothing to get excited about unless you're an iPad videographer. I really like the iPad Air as a tablet in and of itself and as an alternative to the iPad Pro. The updated design is very lightweight, as always. The A14 processor and USB-C make this iPad Air more capable than any Air model to come before it. Performance is absolutely outstanding, and I can do so much more with this tablet now that we've got USB-C. Battery life is solid, but it could be better, and the Smart Connector and Apple Pencil 2 support are great to have, but it's not really offering anything new. It's just on a cheaper iPad, but I would definitely call this cheaper with a lowercase c, because the Air starts at $599 for the 64 gig of storage model, and for that price, I wouldn't say the Air's too expensive, but if you want to kit this out with the Magic Keyboard and Apple Pencil, you're well over $1,000 in the blink of an eye. Or if you opt for the 256 gigabyte option, you're only $50 away from an iPad Pro. And for that $50 more, you're getting a much more refined experience in the iPad Pro. Face ID, better display, better speakers, and double the storage. If the Air 4 was $499 instead of $599, I think Apple would have the ultimate iPad on their hands as far as value. But not this year, I guess. If you're not the kind to bother with accessories like keyboards or styluses and just want a modern iPad experience, or are just looking for a step up from the baseline iPad 8, then the Air is definitely a great choice. But if you're looking at the Air as a slightly cheaper alternative to the iPad Pro, then you probably just want to get the Pro. It feels so much more complete than the standard Air, but when this eventually comes down in price a bit at retailers, I think this would be a great middle-of-the-road option. I think this iPad could easily give anyone 3 to 4 years of smooth usability. I just wish it was a tad cheaper. But what do you guys think about the new iPad Air? Are you interested in picking one up? Let us know in the comments section down below, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and make sure to subscribe for future content like this. Thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.